Alright, welcome in friends, I'm Das Food, and I haven't been missing, you've been gone a while. No, but jokes aside, I have taken a new job. I've been very busy, so my schedule has definitely suffered as a result, but I promise I'm going to try to get back on that grind and get you your videos a little more frequently. Now, for today's topic, I wanted to do something kind of positive because I ended the chapter grades one on a bit of a negative note. It was a bit of a, I'm just not really feeling the game right now, so I thought, let's turn around, let's do something positive. Let's look at the best powers that have been given to the killers in Dead by Daylight. One thing I want to note when I talk about this is that it is incredibly hard to design powers for a game like this, and honestly, it's one thing I think the devs deserve a lot of credit for. I had a much harder time coming up with the alternative to this list, which was the worst powers in Dead by Daylight. This one was actually hard to narrow down to 5 because, frankly, there are a lot of really quality powers. Which is to say that if you don't see your favorite killer in here, who knows, maybe I really like their power and I just don't consider it cream of the crop, but certainly not bad. I think more powers are good than bad in this game. When evaluating what I like or dislike in a power, I decided to have some kind of like a criteria, I guess. So my criteria was as follows. I made a little list and it says, a good power should, and it has 4 things. It should feel satisfying to use on the killer's end, it should allow for meaningful counterplay from survivors, it should possess a noticeable and substantive skill ceiling, and finally, it should facilitate purposeful gameplay. Some of that is admittedly a little probably verbose, maybe a little overly wordy, but I feel like the points are pretty clear there. So instead of doing a forever intro, we're going to get right into this one, and we're going to go from 5 to 1, but first, I do want to give some honorable mentions. So when we talk about the honorable mentions, I want to start off with Plague, who very nearly made my top 5 because I like how she mixes up gameplay. Facing the Plague is just unlike facing anybody else. Even somebody like Oni or maybe Legion who also encourage you not to heal, it's just really not comparable to what the Plague does. The Plague takes out one of the core aspects of the game, but for whatever reason, it actually makes it kind of fun, and you have to decide, are you going to risk it and play injured, or are you going to give her an advanced form of her power? I also do think that a Plague kind of gets misunderstood as somebody who maybe doesn't require as much skill as she actually does, but the top tier Plagues are pretty clearly head and shoulders above the others. I'm a big believer in the Plague. I like this character, and I think she's really neat. Maybe she's at number 6 on here, but for now we're just going to call it an honorable mention. I also like Pyramid Head. I gave him an honorable mention as well, and though I know that he's really good for tunneling, he's also really good for diversifying your gameplay. And if you want to talk about a skill ceiling, you have to talk about Pyramid Head. Pyramid Head's skill ceiling is ridiculous. A top tier Pyramid Head feels so oppressive, but not in the same way that a top tier Nurse, Blight, or Spirit does. I like that Pyramid Head is able to counter some of the stronger things on the survivor side of the thing, of the thing. That was a good term. No, I like what Pyramid Head brings to the table. I think he's really fun. Another one I really like is Hillbilly. I think Hillbilly's great. Hillbilly is really only not in the top 5 because he's so rough that if I'm going to make this criteria where I say part of it is that it has to feel good on the killer's end, Billy feels good when he feels good, right? When you get the chainsaws, it's great. When you get a cross-map chainsaw, it's even better. I mean, it's euphoric. But when it's not that, when you're missing out on getting your downs because it takes just a little too long to rev the chainsaw, or, you're getting penalized for revving the chainsaw, which is, again, just a ridiculous mechanic. There should be no overheat on Hillbilly. I'm going to die on this hill. But outside of that, there's a lot to like here. It is fun to zoom around the map. It's fun to hit chainsaws. I like the little sound he makes when you go. It's nice. Overall, good, but man, it's a shame to me that he's not quite a little bit higher. We then get Wesker, and look, here's the thing. I am so sick of playing against Wesker. And honestly, I don't necessarily always enjoy playing as him because sometimes the collision is just, gosh darn it, man. It is so janky. It's just wacky. But, people love this character, and I wanted to give a bit of a shout out here. Look, Wesker's cool. I wouldn't say that he's necessarily one of my favorites, but he is one of the community's favorites, and I see why. He's like a more balanced version of the Nurse, and I think that's pretty cool. And then finally, for the honorable mentions, we have a very controversial pick, that being the Doctor. I really like the Doctor. I enjoy playing as him. I think there's a lot to like about his kit, and I really do think he brings something new to the table, and that he's essentially just a killer that says, nope, you're not going to stealth on me. You're not going to immerse your way around the map. And and honestly, it's pretty fun. He's not really the strongest killer, but I do think he tends to get underrated when people start talking about who's strong and who's not. Not to say he's A tier, but you know, at top of C tier probably. He's a solid enough killer, and there's just something so satisfying about the zapping, the giggling, the whole thing. It's a fun package, and obviously on the survivor side of the equation, you can certainly counter him. So a lot to like there, and I'm actually a pretty big Doctor fan. But that was the list of honorable mentions. So what I want to do now is move into the main list, and we're going to start with number 5, the pig. Now, let's get this out of the way, right? Yes, Amanda, the pig, is on the weaker side. Nobody's going to deny that, or most people aren't going to deny that. But I think that despite being kind of weak, most of her abilities are actually fairly well done. I like a lot of what she brings to the table. I think that her dash attack is actually a lot stronger than people think. And there was a time where I thought it was kind of useless, but if you watch somebody like Scorpions playing the pig, there's definitely usage for this ability. And also it really opens the door for skillful play. This is a character that the better you get, the more you're going to be able to show that off, which is not the same necessarily for every killer. While there are going to be some who disagree with me, for example, not that I hate this character, I would actually say kind of a secondary main for me, but I think that somebody like Nemesis, a really, really good Nemesis versus just a good Nemesis, I don't know that that comes down as much to the Nemesis power as much as it does knowledge of the game itself. Whereas the difference between a top tier pig and just a good pig is going to be knowing how to play the pig specifically. So I do think this is a killer that allows for skillful play. And another thing that I really like about the pig is that she does introduce a secondary objective. And what's cool about this one is that it's a little harder to get going than some of the secondary objectives, like the aforementioned Nemesis or like the Cinebite or somebody like that. You get this secondary objective and it's a little harder to get going. You have to down somebody and you have to put the helmet on them, and then they have to go search the boxes. But because it's a little harder, it is more pressing and potentially deadly. And I think that's cool. I really enjoy what the reverse bear traps bring to the table in this game. Really, when I look at this killer, what I see is I would say only 2 real downsides. One of those being the crouch, which, you know, it's great that she can lose her terror radius, but at the cost of going that slow, I'm just not sure it's worth it. And then there's the issue of her roar. I really wish that she wouldn't roar when she does her attack, and that it would just be left up to hearing the sound of her weapon unsheathing, because that is a distinct sound. I really don't think it's that hard to notice. And the roar is just so blatant. It's like, you're about to be attacked. Whereas the sheath is just kind of like, hey, there's a pig in the area, which I don't know. I mean, it's a subtle thing, but I would say if they were to improve the crouch and the roar, remove the roar, improve the crouch, yeah, I think that'd be a good thing. But overall, no matter what they do, I do think the pig is actually rather well designed, and overall, she earns her place at number 5 on this list. At number 4, we have the Cinebite. So, first and foremost, before you give me these dislikes, I know, but first and foremost, it's gotta be said, it's not Pinhead's fault that so many survivors are absolutely brain dead. This is a good secondary objective, this referring to the lament configuration. It's a good secondary objective. Most people just stink at prioritizing. They're just really bad at picking up on, hey, somebody's got to go do it. I think that the lament configuration is actually a really cool mechanic. And it's a good reminder for me that whenever survivors start talking about, oh, we really, really want secondary mechanics added to the game, I'm not sure they're aware of what they're saying, because it seems to me like they're pretty upset about a secondary objective being added. So I'm not gonna go into that whole tangent, but just, you know, be intellectually consistent either way. And I try to be. So I used to really kind of dislike the Cinebite, but then I started playing more and more Cinebites. And look, I will say this, for whatever reason, yes, Cinebite players tend to be pretty mean. They tend to be the type, they're gonna tunnel you down as quickly as possible, yada, yada, yada. But we're not talking about the reputation of the players, we're talking about the actual power design. We're talking about what behavior the devs actually have control over. And when it comes to that aspect, I think they did a great job. I think the Cinebite is really, really well designed. Trying to dodge chains is legitimately fun. I think it's a good time. I really, really enjoy facing Cinebite players. And while it's true that yes, God tier Cinebites can make it a bit of a foregone conclusion, I think that really skilled survivors can also make it to where it's not a foregone conclusion. If you can outsmart the Cinebite, you are going to avoid that chain, which is kind of fun because it's not the same way as like Spirit where it's just 50-50 simulator and you're just guessing. There is an intuitive nature to it. You do have to guess when the chain's going to come out, what angle it's going to come out, where are they most likely expecting you to be. There's a little more to it, and you do get that slight moment where you're able to try to dodge it once it's launched. So overall, yeah, I think dodging chains is fun. I understand where some people may not like it as much, but I'm a pretty big fan of it. And yeah, I think this one mostly does come down to the lament configuration. And for me, I think playing around the box is very unique and demands players bring a different approach than normal, right? It's going to be different from your other games, and I enjoy that about it. And ideally, I mean, something that is ideal, I should say, is that bad killers actually won't get much value out of the box, bad players, I mean. So from a balance perspective, it's not busted. You have to be pretty good about managing the lament configuration, and I enjoy that. I enjoy that, you know, the best pinheads on earth can make your time pretty rough because they're gonna juggle that box like crazy. But the bad ones, nah, they're never gonna get that advantage out of it unless you literally do nothing on your end. In short, this is a killer with the potential to be nasty, but with, honestly, I would say an A+ design. I really like a lot about the power here, and I kinda wish people were a little warmer to Pinhead and Shatterer because I think they're fun. Next, at number 3, we have one that should surprise absolutely nobody. That is the Huntress. So, I gotta start with this. The sound design team nailed this one. There's so much that is so good about the Huntress's sound design. From the lullaby, which is chilling, it's iconic. It's one of the most iconic aspects of Dead by Daylight, to the, you know, to the sound of the hatchets hitting somebody. I think that is just fabulous. And really, I could stop on that one. I could stop on just the sound of the hatchets hitting. That sound almost like it's going into a pool of water or something. Like it's just kind of this pleasant little, I don't know. It is a fantastic thing, and especially when you get it like cross map or something. I mean, that sound is just music to your ears, and it's fantastic. They really knocked it out of the park with this one. It's a very well designed killer just from a sound perspective alone. But of course, we're talking about the powers here, and I only mentioned the sound design there because the hatchets are her power, and you get that sound by using her power. But let's go beyond that. Let's talk a little more about it. So I think when you talk about the power of the Huntress, which is of course very simple, very straightforward. It's just throwing hatchets. It's just a projectile killer where if you hit one projectile, it injures the survivor. This simplicity actually makes room for the Huntress to have possibly the highest skill ceiling of any killer. I think probably the highest skill ceiling of any killer. Though, if we're being fair, and we are, I'm going to say that skill ceiling is somewhat limited by, ironically, actual ceilings. Indoor maps are not the Huntress's friend. However, you can still make pretty insane plays on places like Larry's or Midwich. It's not out of the question, it's just, you're not gonna get a cross map or something, right? And speaking of cross maps, I do think that this is probably the best use of a lullaby for any character in the game, which is why we call it a lullaby, because she was the first one. So, you know, like what Sadako has, is it really a lullaby? No, but it functions the same way, so we call it a lullaby. But this time out, in terms of giving the survivors room for counterplay, this was a really good call to make it so that if the Huntress is within a wide swath of you, you know. Because once she closes that gap, she becomes terrifying. She's deadly from a distance, sure, or I guess she's dangerous from a distance, but deadly from up close. And, you know, I think that most people could agree that Huntress is one of those where, yes, like most of them, if you go up against an absolute god tier player, it's going to feel like there's nothing you can do, but really good survivors are going to be able to, you know, they're going to dive, duck, dip, dive, and dodge, and they're going to make the Huntress's time a little harder. So I think there is a fun cat and mouse element to it, even more so than most killers have. And overall, Huntress is just tremendously designed. I had a really hard time deciding between number 2 and number 1, and I kind of went back and forth a lot, so let's go on and we'll stick with it, and I'm sure as soon as I start recording this part of it, I'm gonna be like, no, I should have gone the other way. But anyway, number 2, we are going to go with the Demogorgon. And look, this one, in my notes, I just put epitome of balance. This is the epitome of balance when it comes to Dead by Daylight. There is so much to like about what they did here, because it rewards high-level play while being accessible to newer players, which, I mean, sadly, that is ironic because there really are no new demo players, because we're going on years of demo not being sold in the store anymore, tragically. But a player who decides to just pick up the Demogorgon and start playing as the Demogorgon right now would initially be able to find some kind of success, usually just with the shred ability. However, as you start playing Demogorgon more and more, you realize, hey, I can cover a lot of distance if I use shred at this particular part of the map. Hey, I can hit around this angle just barely. I can just barely clip them. I have time to hit this. Hey, you know, I guess portals. Portals would be the big one, right? If you want to separate a pro Demogorgon or a really skilled Demogorgon from a less skilled or newer Demogorgon, do they use their portals? Because the portals make all the difference in the world, and they're what take Demogorgon from being somebody, I don't know. I mean, realistically, Demogorgon would almost be a lot like Deathslinger if it didn't have the portals, right? It's just instead of reeling people to them, it launches towards them. Kind of like Blight in that regard, I suppose. You know, a lot of the killers are kind of similar to varying degrees, but by giving the portals, the Demogorgon can teleport around the map, and it can do so with great creativity, because Freddy will never be creative with his teleporting, right? I mean, sure, you can bait going to a teleport and then try to cut off another survivor, but your actual teleporting, it will never be creative. The Demogorgon, though, you can put your portals in all kinds of places, and they do. They do get rather creative with them, and obviously that's just really cool. So from the killer perspective, you have a lot to work with here. But from the survivor perspective, because remember, when we're talking about fun powers, if it's just miserable for the other side, well, I guess it's not that fun of a power, right? Survivors do have this unique thing where they get to try to bait out shreds, which I think could be rather fun, and they also get to seal portals. So they have to choose. Do I sit here on this generator while I know there's a portal right over here? I don't know how close it is, 5 meters, 10 meters, whatever it is, in range where if that Demogorgon comes out of that portal, I may be in trouble. Okay, do I take the time to seal that? Do I go oblivious while I'm doing it and potentially get hit? Or do I just work on this gen? Do I hammer it out? Do I try to get done with it? That's a fun decision. That's what I like to see from powers. Overall, I do think this is just a really, really well-designed killer, and you could make a great case for it being number one. I love just about everything about the Demogorgon and its power. And before we get to number one, I do just want to remind you, if you're enjoying this, please do subscribe. It'd mean a lot to me. I will give you a crisp high five if you do. Thank you. And at number one, we have the Oni. Now, it should be no secret to anyone here. I love the Oni. The Oni is an awesome killer, and though I am tragically boosted and trashed with him, I think he's great. I still love this killer. And I think a lot of survivors do as well, despite how strong Oni is. I think a lot of people like facing the Oni because Oni is all the fun of going up against the shape, but with a lot less of the BS, like the Tombstone or like the Perma Tier 3. The only real comparable thing there, I guess, would be that bad players can still feed his power. So maybe you're a looping god and you haven't let the Oni touch you once. Well, the Dwight on your team isn't very good at looping, and now the Oni has his whooping stick out, and I guess you're on the menu. But outside of that, yeah, it's really a lot of the fun of facing Myers, which, by the way, Myers is a lot of fun to face. But again, you're not going to get tombstoned, which that alone elevates the Oni. Also, elevating the Oni would be his insanely high skill ceiling, because if you watch high-level Onis play, it's just remarkable. I mean, this is a killer that basically asks you to be as daring as possible, to really go for it. You are going to start the game powerless, hopeless, helpless. And if you can just nick that first survivor, just get the blood flowing, suddenly, Oni just got a lot more dangerous. He may not be there yet, but it's coming. It's gonna happen. And when it does, only the strong shall survive. This is such a blast to find yourself in this position, one way or the other way, whether you're the Oni or you're the survivors. And by the way, if I'm the Oni, as you can tell from the background footage, nobody's actually in any danger, but maybe the walls. Maybe I'll hit the walls and nobody else. But overall, yeah, there's just something so exciting about hearing the Oni. He enters into his blood fury. He starts demon dashing around, and it's terrifying. It's really, really, in a game that's lost a lot of its scares, it can be genuinely terrifying to go up against an Oni, which is just awesome. Now, that being said, skillful looping from the survivors can make the Oni's early game brutal. There is meaningful and purposeful gameplay here on both sides, because if a team is really good, it is going to take forever before the Oni gets his power. I mean, you may be talking about, again, if you're up against a really good team, you may legitimately have 3 to 4 gens pop before you get that first demon dash. Now, is that what a top tier Oni is going to do? Probably not. However, up against a top tier Swift, yeah, maybe. And that means that Oni is going to have to try to make the absolute most out of his demon dash, which is just so exciting. It's such a cool way to bounce out this killer, where he becomes absolutely busted and absolutely terrifying, but only for short durations. And again, unlike Myers, he can't just unalive you instantly, which is awesome. I like that. So yeah, I really like about Oni. I really like a lot about Oni. The boomer bust nature of him makes him fun for both sides. Yeah, there are going to be some games that are just naturally rough. Some games where the Oni slugs you out and it's no fun for anybody. I get that, but I don't know. I don't think that's enough to really dock him for, because you can have fun games against literally every killer. And more often than not, I think the Oni is going to be a good time. But those are my thoughts. I am very curious to hear what you think. Who did I not put on here that I should have? You know, I almost put the twins on here just to keep up my love for the twins, but I thought there might be a legitimate revolution in the comments below. So if you think the twins should have been in here, you know, let me know. If you think somebody else should have been here, I am eager to hear. Or, hey, you know, food, why'd you put this one in there? Specifically Cinebite. I think there are going to be some people who strongly disagree with me on that one. But anyway, either way, I appreciate you watching this video. I thank you so much for sticking around to the end. I hope you're having a lovely day wherever you are. And until next time, I have been Das Food. Bye, friends.
I've been dreaming on in my head like I've seen it. A life worth living is a life with meaning. I'll do what I love till my heart stops beating. I'm feeding this demon. Got a taste, can't erase bitterness in my